you come up with an idea, then you obsess about that idea, then you like now in Nuevo, right, you obsess about an idea and you go, this could really be a force for good. And then you jump 2-3 years down the line and you're walking into a big HQ with multiple people and teams working on projects and strategy teams and finance. And you're like, wow, that's come from an idea and it's got it. That's the moment where you're like, that's that like fulfillment and that pride and that kind of, I'm exactly what I'm meant to be. Like, this is incredible.
All right, man, let's do this. So I was drawn to your content first, well, mainly from Harry's. Harry recommended it to me, but you have a very appealing tagline, which is building the world's most purpose-driven agency. Now, I know you're still on the mission for it, but that caught my attention, I would say, for sure. But to take a step back from that, though, what would you think your purpose is? And what do you think you want to focus on?
It's definitely kind of, I had a bit of a background in different kind of roles that were heavily reliant on purpose, and that's why I got into those roles. So coming into this space, it was very much, right, what purpose can I have? What can my skill sets and background bring to the industry? And then the purpose for me, that building the world's most kind of purpose-driven agency, really was us putting a picket out there and saying, that's our kind of shining light. That's what we need to aim for. That's what we need to go after. And I knew by having a big ambition like that, that's how you get the attention of good people to join you on your journey. So that's always kind of, it was one of the first things we said when launching Nuevo, and now kind of 2-3 years on, it's still just there as a massive reminder, like, hey, this is what we want to get to. And I think that's really important when you're building something like this, to remember where you're going rather than what you're doing day to day, because it changes so much, especially in this industry when there's loads of different things coming out all the time. And everything's changing so much. If you can just have that's something to focus on, I think it really grounds you and keeps you focused in the right direction.
What do you think the kind of spark for sustainability was?
It was more kind of looking at, okay, what can we do that's good? And what do we have skill set wise that can play into that? So the first thing was understanding how bad kind of productions were, meaning the inefficiencies of production world. And Purpose Disruptors use a great quote that out of all the content shot globally, only 3% ever makes out there to the world. So when you look at that, and then you actually take our time, which was 2 years, 3 years spent on mountains in hard locations on productions, we really understand that and say, yeah, we can see why people bring 20, 30 people when there's probably only 7 people needed to do that. Or people set up whole villages where they're going when they don't need to. They can really rely on the local communities to give a lot of the stuff they need. So a big thing for us was we really see the inefficiencies, and we think actually by our background and experience, we can clear them up quite quickly. And then that really meant we could play into the whole carbon piece and lower the carbon on space.
Did you ever think, though, that in the pursuit of that, you would sacrifice quality?
So that was something we had to really balance at the start and go, do we really think we can do this? Because we knew if we went out there saying we can reduce the carbon on productions, but then deliver a pretty shitty film at the end of it.
A fucking TikTok reel at the end of it.
Yeah, they're going to use us once for the PR story, and then they're going to go back to their conventional agency that don't care. So that's been a massive focus, and it still is. Make sure we're bringing in world-class people into the team that's going to deliver time and time again, and can overcome the challenge of sustainability in this creative space.
Man, that's pretty wild. But I think it's quite interesting because, like, your entrance into your career was in the Marines. So how did you get into that really in particular, and what were you doing in the Marines?
So when I left school, I was kind of a bit at ends where I knew I wanted to kind of go in the military because I had uncles in the military. They were in the RAF, and that was something I was looking at, going, do I want to go in the Royal Air Force? And I started going down that route. But it just didn't feel me. I was like super into my fitness. And I was like, I want to do something a bit harder, more challenging physically. And I saw a Royal Marine Commando ad, which was like 99.9% need not apply. And I started looking it up, and I just got absolutely obsessed with it and started looking at people trying to pass. And I really remember these guys in school that were kind of big, strong rugby players, a couple of years older, that everyone was intimidated by. And they all left at the same time and went off to the Marines and all came back and failed the course. And I remember thinking, wow, like people like that can't do it. I was like, imagine if I went and did it. And I was like, 65 kg of nothingness. And that was kind of in my head then. And I was like, I really want to try it. And 17, then I just joined, passed first time, went through training and went to 40s Commando Royal Marines on high readiness for 2 years. Went there for 2 years, went to 4-2 Commando, and then ended up at Hamworthy. So it was a good 5 years in there, proper interesting time, learned a lot, grew up a lot. But yeah, it's great.
Man, what was the training like, or not necessarily the training, but that entrance exam? Like, what did you actually have to do?
Yeah, so the pre-joining fitness tests and the PRMC you do, where you do a week down there and you just get absolutely beasted. You get hardly any sleep. You're crawling around in mud. You're running with weight. It's fireman carries, and they wean out kind of half the course at that stage, and then you have to pass that to then get your boots that you then break in and get your start date for the actual main course, which is 32 weeks. So it's 8 months of training, and you kind of turn up 40, 50 of you at day one, and your hair gets shaven, you kind of get in these jumpsuits, and that's you in. Then you've got to see how long you can make it through, and you lose a lot of people from injuries or kind of quitting all the way through the course.
Fuck, man. What was the most difficult part of that training?
For me, it was like the early days. It was like shocker capture, they call it, where you go from having your own life and being your own person to then just suddenly just a number, and you jumped into this thing where you don't choose what you do for even a minute of the day. They tell you, be here, wear this, do that. You've got 15 minutes to eat, go out there. Then you've got 15 minutes to get changed. Then you're 2 minutes late, so you get put in water, so you're freezing cold outside. Then it's like, go back in, get changed, come out. And then you're up all night ironing all that clothes, polishing everything, ready for you get to bed about 3 a.m. Then you're up again at 4:30, 5, and it just breaks you down. I think that was the hardest bit. And then as you go through training, it does get harder physically. So the marches get longer, the weight gets more on your back. So you're kind of walking for miles and miles across Scotland, Wales, Dartmoor with these massive burgans on and weapons, and before you need creaking, and not much sleep and hungry. And it's all part of the process. And you get to a point at the end, which I think is the whole point of training, where you just do it. And you don't really, you feel the pain, but there's no question in your mind whether you're going to drop out or not. It's just one of those, you go, this is what we do. And you just carry on walking through the pain, and then you build up to your commando tests, which is kind of a 9-mile speed march, Tarzan assault course, a endurance course, and then a 30-mile run with weight across Dartmoor to get your green beret.
Fuck, man. You know what I love about that is, like, people can look in from the outset and say, oh, like, that's crazy. Like, why would you ever do that? But I saw a lot of references towards the US Marines or Navy SEALs or whoever it was, where they were looking at putting people through like extreme intense training, whereby like they were almost like torturing them to a point of view. And people on the media, like the CNBC, like CNN, were like, oh no, that's too bad, whatever. But it's like, if we don't prepare them in that regard, then when they go to war, then they're going to be like literal pussies because they won't be able to protect themselves or anything. So they put themselves through that much pain. Were you trying to go through like a process like that, do you think?
Yeah, I think that's why they do it. They try and make it as real as possible and as hard as possible. And it's also, it's one of those, you've got like a hard test or a hard exercise next week, and you think, oh, why do they do it? I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. Then you do it, and you push yourself to your kind of limits, and you come through that. And then all of a sudden, it's really strange. You go, yep, that should be in there. I'm glad you do it, because then all of a sudden you have respect for the people next to you and go, they are hard. They can get through this course. And then that's when you go to unit, you look around and every single person there has done exactly the same as you. So if you have to go anywhere, you're with people that are fully capable and ready and can deliver when needed to.
And trust, like as you were speaking about beforehand, like you develop that trust and reputation with each other, which is sick.
Yeah.
So what were you doing actually in the Marines then?
So I went as a general duties rifleman, basically as just a Royal Marines Commando to 40s Commando. And when we're there, we're lead commando, so in 2012, 2013. And then on high readiness, you'll go and do exercises in different locations. So we were on ship for a bit. Then went out to Albania to do some mountain training, to live in the mountains. Then we went out to the Middle East. We went out to Jordan, and we were doing short-term training teams with like kind of partners across Jordan. And that was at the rise of kind of ISIS, really. So all that was kicking off at the same time. So we were kind of in readiness there and getting a lot of the news reports and things. We spent kind of 3-4 months out there, I think it was. The whole trip was around 4 or 5 months. Then came back, and then it was just still on high readiness. Then I went to 4-2, similar kind of role. And then my last kind of job in the Marines was evasive driving instructor. So it was kind of, I wrote off 30, 40 cars. Just learning how to ram cars off roads, kind of do pit maneuvers. Yeah, it was interesting how to drive like close protection driving. So you drive kind of within a hand width of the car in front, car side to side, and you got for your speed and everything, and how to move your feet and your toes to keep the car at a steady pace if you're getting really close to someone, and all that, which was super interesting. And that's where in my last role, where I did a surveillance course and learned how to use camera systems.
Yeah, that was my next question. Was like, how the fuck do you go from being the Marines to having a rifle to understanding camera angles? How does that go about?
It was on the surveillance course, so I picked up a camera. I was just like, this is seriously cool. And then I brought a little camera and started on my leave going to different places. I started just shooting anything I saw where I was, and started learning how to edit and put it and frame it in different ways, and start building up a local network of brands in the area that I'd shoot content for. So like I think backpacks and jackets and watches and that kind of space. And it got to a point where my lounge became full of free product. And I just said, you know what, I'm going to turn around and say to these brands, absolutely love working with you, but I've got to start charging for my time. And when I did, everyone came back saying, yeah, let's fine, give us your day rate. And I was like, shit, I've got a kind of business model here that I didn't know I had. And that was it then. Decided to try and pursue that. Left the Marines at 23. And then my short-term focus was to build a brand doing something I love. And I quite quickly learned that if I stay in the photography route, it's going to take a while to get to the point where you can actually scale anything and grow anything, because you normally get employed as one person. If I go into the agency setup and I can have filmmakers and editors, we can grow quite a lot quicker and be across a lot more projects and win a lot more work. So I went down that route within 6 months and started building it from there.
Man, that is sick. And it's funny because there's a lot of similarities, not the Marine stuff, but in terms of like the videography, in terms of what I'm doing, because it was like at some point you get limited when it's only yourself. But when you go into the agency route, you can just hire the gaps that you have. So for me, it's design, production. It's kind of time, to be honest. It's the biggest thing, obviously. And you're able to build out like a much bigger suite, I guess, and add on more things. And I guess that's how you grew to be the way it was, But how did you know you could build it? Because obviously you came out of school, went to the Marines, and now you're starting like this kind of business venture. But did you have much background in business? Did you have much of an entrepreneurial background?
No, absolutely nothing. So when I actually left the Marines, I lived in a shed in my parents' garden. They call it like a log cabin, but it had electricity, but it had no water, no toilet, no bathroom, anything. So it was like me and my girlfriend lived there, so we'd get our big coats on in winter and walk up to the house trying to get in to go for a wee. But we lived there for 2 years, and I had 400 quid in the bank when I left the Marines trying to start the business. So and my friend did the first website for 200 quid. So I live in cheap, trying to make it, trying to work out how to do it. But I think that's good. I think that's really got me in a good place now, where I had to learn the hard way, and I had to learn how to be really careful with the funds at the start, very careful, and learn how to value my time, and I had to push quicker for sales, where I think if you're just given some money to start something, you're not as hungry on the sales, where I was like, literally like, this is not going to work if I can't get this over the line. So I learned how to sell quite quickly. And I was never really, going back to the point earlier about how we went to a wider agency rather than photography. For me, it was never about, I wasn't precious about my work. Do you know what I mean? And my photos. What I was really into was that space. I wanted to be in that creative space and be around creatives and see things come to life. That's why it was quite easy for me to switch to go, let's build a wider agency here rather than focus just solely on photography.
I love that, man.
If I went wider agency, I could probably make money quicker, and which I needed to do with a couple hundred quid in the bank.
I completely agree with you, man. Especially because like you can just get broader, you can just get a broader reach so quickly.
Yeah.
And man, you could pretty much get to like any brand in some regards because you can help them in some capacity, Did you ever find yourself having to, like, in the early days when you had no money, did you ever find yourself having to, take deals that you didn't want to, or sacrifice on price a lot of the times when you're trying to get some good deals?
Yeah, if we look back now, what we're doing, we were with sometimes the same team of what we use today, right? Which are incredible videographers that are working with the Tom Hardys and things now. And we were doing like taking that crew on set, and we were charging the client 350 quid a day for the whole crew to go and film something, because we had to fill a gap, and we were like, well, it's better to get paid than not get paid. And it was like, we look back now, and some of those brands got incredible deals. But it was
man.
filling gaps and making things work. And yeah, it was a really, I look back on it and it was a really nice time in my life as well, because it was the hardest thing I've done, growing something like that and trying to make it work, because it was just relentless. I worked weekends, I worked nights, early mornings, and you're always on thinking about it and messaging back to people. And is that going to work? Is that going to not? Then I started trying to learn about insurances and all this stuff that I was like, I didn't have a clue what I'm doing here. But also it was a really stress-free time in a weird way, because I had no one depending on me. I had no like loads of salaries going out the door or anything like that. Do you know what I mean? At the very grassroots start of it, it was just, how do we learn our trade? How do we cut our teeth, and how do we get better each time? So that was just a simple focus. Whereas kind of as you expand businesses, then you're obsessed with P&L sheets and all the stuff that comes with it to make sure you can survive as a business, and your cash flow forecasting, everything that comes with it. At that point, it wasn't that. It was just, we want to shoot cool shit in cool places. And that was all I had to try and do.
Yeah, man, I love that, because like so many people worry about what they're going to do at 50K a month, but they don't know what they're going to do to get their first client. And they're not
Yeah.
focused on, just getting the first client. They're just getting the first bit of work. Like, who gives a shit if you're like super inefficient in the beginning, and if it's not scalable? Because like people will say, obviously agencies aren't scalable, but of course you can scale it in different ways, with the price and all that kind of stuff, So there's different aspects to it, I guess. But I think as well, maybe what could have helped you was coming from the Marines, the fact that you were disciplined, you had been through a lot of hardship, I guess, in some regards, physically for sure, and maybe mentally as well, so that you knew that when your back was against the wall, you were prepared a bit more. Because most people these days are quite soft, probably me included, they don't go through the Marines, So do you think that helped you a lot?
Yeah, but I think the biggest thing really was having a point of difference in the industry. And I really think getting that first conversation is hard, especially in the agency world, where there's so many agencies knocking on brands' door, right? And a lot of them offering it for cheap or free because they want the case studies, especially the good brands where we wanted to go after, where we're going to spend time in the mountains. So I really think the actual background and the story of the Marines was really good to open that door, because they were interested. Because everyone I spoke to was like, what? Like, why are you in this space? And they wanted to hear the story to work out why we had just rocked up in this space. Like, hey, we'd love to work with you. So it actually got the first conversation. And then once you have that first conversation, they see the kind of journey we've been on. A lot of people are like, okay, let's give them a shot. So it actually helped us get that first project over the line. I definitely think the discipline helps as well. And the biggest thing for me was, in the Marines, I learned how far I could be pushed, and learned that when I think I'm on empty, I'm not on empty. I've got another kind of that reserve tank that you can enter if you really need to. And that kind of put things in perspective, growing the business, where I was like, I'm not tired. Like, I can push more, I can do more, I can keep going. And so I definitely put the hours in needed to get it going. And when I did kind of I'd get back from a shoot at 4 or 5 a.m. and be like, right, I've got a meeting at 8 a.m. And I think like a lot of people would probably put that off and say, I can't make that, that's silly. But I was just like, well, I need to do it because I need to film next week. I need to bring that in the pipeline. And I just kind of got used to that kind of sleep deprivation from the Marines, and just took that into the rogues for the first year or two, which probably isn't healthy, but it definitely helped us grow. And the
100%,
thing I'm
man.
doing now is I learned a lot, but also I really underestimated the power of building those relationships in the early days. I still connect and I still speak to a lot of the people I worked on in the first couple of months of growing the business. I think that's the power of kind of the network you're building, that you kind of overlook at that stage of building a startup. But if you treat them right and they treat you right, and you build good solid foundations, that lasts years, and they move jobs, roles, and they intro you to people. And I really underestimated the power of having a good, strong network, I think.
That's huge, man, because I guess when you play the long game, that becomes very valuable. Of course,
Yeah.
everyone has like short-term thinking, but if you're thinking 10 years or 20 years, that's hugely beneficial. What's the difference between your first company, Rolling Rogues, if I pronounced it correctly, and your
Yeah.
second company? Like, what's different? What was different in the model in terms of your production?
So Rolling Rogues was very much about it was playing into a kind of culture and a movement at that time. There was a lot of veteran brands popping up. SAS Who Dares Wins just came on TV. So it's the first time there was a spotlight on that world, if you like. So there was a lot of support around veteran brands. There was also this big kind of custom motorbike movement with like the bike shed in London and everything. And there was so many veteran and motorbike tattoo brands popping up. And I was like, okay, we're perfectly in the mix here, because we've got tattoos, we came from the Marine background, we all ride motorbikes. So we kind of played into that culture. I managed to be like the go-to agency for that kind of stuff. So I think I kind of saw the movement and we played into that space. But it very, like looking back, it very much was production only. We didn't have creative. We definitely didn't have a strategy. It was me just kind of guessing how to survive as a business. We weren't for good. We were good at getting places, but we weren't like impactful positively. There was a lot I could pick apart and say we got wrong with it, but it got me to where I am. So I knew it was just part of learning, and you don't know what you don't know, right? So I guess the biggest difference is the purpose we've got now and how we've kind of used the skill sets built there to do what we do now. So it kind of, that was needed part of the journey, if that makes sense.
Man, how the fuck did you sell it? Because usually people say like you can't like sell an agency or it's more difficult. So like for context, you sold to Berkshire Hathaway to Warren Buffett's company. How did someone from the Marines do that?
So it was kind of 2 years in. We won a discrete military unit contract. So what that means is there's discrete military units that are really hard to get into, really hard to work with because of all the secrecy that surrounds it and everything. And we started working in that space and becoming trusted. And that's very valuable, right? Because you don't just get trusted. No money can buy you in there. It's who you know and the kind of reputation and everything built on trust again, like we were saying earlier. So when I got that contract, it suddenly became like a talking point, and it became something we're going, okay, we really want to be in that space. And the company I sold to were really trying to push technology into that space and that network. So for them, it wasn't so much the value of the agency and the work we were doing, it was the network I'd built. So going back to my point earlier, I really underestimated the power of a real powerful network. So that's what they kind of wanted into, and the reputation we were building in that space. So that's why the deal was constructed around that. And then I kind of went in-house there as kind of a chief operating officer role, and then headed up building technology for that network. So it was insane. It was just, I finally thought I'd started learning the creative world, and how to pull together kind of campaigns and things, and then do all the planning behind it. And all of a sudden I'm chucked in this big world of just technology and tech innovation, trying to learn kind of AR and VR and how teams can pull together to code something and make something as a point of difference, and all the security implications that come with it, and all that world, which was just so new and so like back, just going, I know nothing again, trying to build in that space, which was great, because then it was completely different, going from a startup in a cabin with kind of a couple £100 to then being backed by Berkshire Hathaway to build technology for the military was just again a massive eye opener, a massive jump. And it was one of the moments where I was like pinching myself, like going, what the hell is happening here? But it was a great learning curve again.
Man, that is crazy. So like how does that deal even work? Because usually if the founder is like very involved, that like affects the deal construction and like the valuation. So like how do you sell the agency though? Like how is like valued at that value? Because compared to like text, my background's in software as well. Like it's kind of not easy, but it's a lot easier because it's like EBITDA. You look at it, you look at the software, done, and you can walk out the door as a founder.
Yeah. So how they packaged it was kind of upfront consideration. So some cash up front, and then it was a kind of earnout staged over a 5-year period. I didn't stay for the full 5 years, and I think they thought at kind of age I was 25, 26, that they thought give him a big salary that he's not going to leave. But I don't know. Luckily, it stayed in my head that I was like, I've built something from nothing before. I wasn't really that scared of leaving and going back to kind of nothing. It definitely made it harder, but it was, I think they thought give him a big salary, give him a big cash up front consideration, and then he won't leave us ever. But that wasn't the case. I kind of carried on kind of building products in that space, and we did 2 years there, and we looked at virtual reality mission planning tools. So we looked at taking kind of open source map data, punching it into gaming engines, which was kind of used in VR. Then it would mean soldiers or anyone around the world had the ability to walk around a location in virtual reality before they deployed. So it means that you could walk around a location, full VR model like village, and then you could kind of mark landing sites, kind of safety routes in and out, kind of mark up target buildings, overwatch sites, like anything you need to do, and plan it all there before you fly into country. So it was a super interesting task. The thing that frustrated me was like, in the creative world, if you do a photo shoot or a film, within a week you can see the goods. You can see, yeah, that looks really cool. Let's do this. In that world, it was like we'd plan something, agree it, and go, this is going to be really, really cool. It's game changing. And then the tech teams would go away and go, yeah, we'll have something first draft in 6 months. And you're like, what? Like, that takes ages. So that was a big thing for me when I was like frustrated, like,
yeah. It's actually funny, man. So like, yeah, like my background's in like, proper tech startups, and my girlfriend always laughs at me. She's like, it takes you like a fucking month to change a button. Like literally, sometimes it could take like literally a month. So whenever
yeah,
we're trying to like do like big things, big developments, man, it can take 18 months. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And like that's with 9 engineers, fucking 3 teams. You know what I mean? It's just like this. It's like the infrastructure is just like so complicated that it's just even difficult to explain sometimes, like why it would take so long.
yeah, yeah. And especially
Funny,
like
man.
what kind of frustrated me about there was like great company. They're doing some incredible work. And the guy that kind of set up the deal and managed it and everything was such a nice guy. So I'm really grateful for that experience and that opportunity, because I did learn a lot. But the thing that frustrated me was we were kind of bolted onto an existing company, right, with 55, 60 people. So they were doing other client stuff and builds, and then I was trying to beg, borrow, steal resources. And when you're trying to develop technology at the cutting edge of innovation within the Ministry of Defence, and then you kind of beg, borrow, and stealing resources, it can get very frustrating, because people are like, no, we're not just putting together an idea or a concept, because it will take 3 days and we need to earn here. And it was that kind of got to me, and I was like, oh, this is really super, super tiring. And actually, I probably would have stayed there a lot longer, but I started noticing in myself that I was coming home and I was being aggy at home, and I wasn't
Yeah.
happy, and I didn't have that fulfilled feeling, because it was a safe wage, and I wanted to fight again, and I wanted to be in that kind of, well, are we going to do it? Are we not? And then when you do it, it's like, yes, this massive high, and you're back at a low, and that kind of startup culture and mentality and stuff. It just being put into that safety blanket, and it was almost like, hey, if it doesn't work this month, it'll work next year, and you're like, oh, I want that. Come
Yeah.
on, let's go.
Yeah. I want the 50-50 whereby like I don't eat tomorrow as a result. You like that
Yeah,
kind of hunger, And man, I can never unlearn this. So I was originally working in investment banking when I was like 21, and I was in London, long time ago now. And I remember there was a contractor there that I met who was a contractor. He was kind of an entrepreneur, I guess. And he was like, the money you make for yourself will mean more than any money you'll ever make for a company.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I was 21 at the time, and I was like, that's it. That's just it. This is in my head. And like I've
yeah,
gone on to work with some great companies. I've gone on to make like a lot of money with some companies and everything. But there's just something about making cash for yourself. And like I'm just saying, if it's like 1,500 quid, you're like, what the fuck? You're like
yeah.
it came out of nowhere.
Yeah,
you
I
know?
think a big thing that just makes me like blows my mind is when you come up with an idea, then you obsess about that idea, then you like now in Nuevo, right, you obsess about an idea and you go, this could really be a force for good. And then you jump 2, 3 years down the line and you're walking into a big HQ with multiple people and teams working on projects and strategy teams and finance, and you're like, wow, that's come from an idea and it's got it. That's the moment where you're like, that's that like fulfillment and that pride and that kind of, I'm
Mm.
exactly what I'm meant to be. Like, this is incredible. And that's the thing I think I'm always chasing now and working towards, that feeling. Yeah, it's insane. And only kind of entrepreneurs that move into that space and have that, because you feel every pound and every penny. Doing when it goes out, when it comes in, and you don't have that relationship when you're employed by people.
You literally just like, oh man, it's like every fucking like it's like loss aversion. Everything that goes out, you're like, oh, and then everything
Yeah,
that comes in, there's like such. And I think of course it's a maturity thing, right? Because this is like your second company, and you're like, you're a bit older than me, I guess, and like you've been through the ropes. But I guess in the early days, it just means a lot.
yeah, it really
So
does, because you're the only person at the start that believes in you, and you really are.
mm,
Like, you've got to prove it, and rightly so. Like, you can't just walk out there and say, I'm going to do this and expect everyone to believe you, right? So you're really on your own, and it's such a nice feeling, and seeing people join and people support your vision and believe it and be on that journey with you. And then you get to a point where you're like, whoa, like a lot of people are believing in this. Like, at the start, I remember it was just me in my bedroom writing like a plan, going, will this work? Will this not? Are people going to like this? Is it going to land? Will it even
mm,
survive first contact? Like, I don't know. Like, and then you kind
mm.
of see everyone coming in on the shared mission, and that's the best feeling.
Yeah, and I think a big thing there about is like having that self belief. Like even when I speak to like other entrepreneurs or founders, is that like you kind of have to, you know, crazily as it says, like, you know, believe in yourself in that aspect, because if you don't, nobody else will, like investors or your partner or first employees, like no one's going to kind of believe in you. So you're going to have that kind of rootless craziness, you know? So,
Yeah, and it's like there's that ruthless kind of self-confidence, if you like, that I can do this, I can get this down the line. But it's then also having the openness and the vulnerability to be willing to fail on your
mm,
journey. I think that's a massive thing. I think people are sat there with the confidence, with a good idea, and probably with a lot of experience in different spaces, but they're too scared to put them out themselves out there to fail. And I think that's such a shame. I think that's a big part of it, that just once you go on that journey and you have a few failures, you kind of go, yeah, like things are going to fail, and then trust your ability that you're good enough to work out a solution or a route to get out of that situation, and understand
mhm,
that what you think you're going to go and do, it will be completely different. Like we've learned so much in Nuevo. If you looked at the business model from day one to what it is now, completely different, completely different. But you've got to go in with that open mindset that you're going to learn so much, and be open and willing to tweak and adjust and go down the different routes you need to get to where you want to. As long as what we were saying earlier, that mission hasn't changed. Just how we're going to get there and how the business looks will change dramatically along that way. And I think that's good business, and that's innovation, that's evolving into the right space you need to be to make it happen.
definitely, man, definitely. So with your new business now, I can't even pronounce it. Nuevo, is that correct?
Nuevo. Yeah.
Nuevo. So you partnered up with Stephen Bartlett for this?
Yeah. So we started making good traction, actually, signing some big clients, kind of learning, kind of cutting our teeth, learning what we were going to be in the world. And then I met Oliver Yankov, who's the co-founder of Flight Story with Stephen. And I chatted to him and told him our plan and our model and everything. And again, like he really liked the background and was like, God, it's so different coming from that world into this world. We met face to face. He got me a meeting with Stephen. We sat down there together and we all agreed, let's do something. So they came on as backers last year. And now they're really helping us consult and find our feet and move in the right way, and kind of borrow their resource when we need it. So it's a great partnership. And it got us steam, got us heard to then actually tell our story properly, which is great.
Hmm. And what type of like capital did you need to get started? Because I suppose on an agency basis, you're still going to be working with clients. So what was your thought process in the beginning?
So at the beginning, we thought, right, we're going to need good people straight away. But then also coming from that real startup, I was never in that position where I was like, right, we need X amount of money to make this work. So we actually again started with nothing. And then I think it was 5 weeks in to saying this is a go, we're going to do this. We signed our first client. And then that was it. Then we used that money to grow and grow and grow. So we were always kind of in the positive, if you like, cash flow positive, and we were kind of going forward, building off that. So we've actually done it in a way that we haven't needed a lot of investment to get to where we are. The biggest kind of putting money into the company came 6 months ago, where we decided to really take it to the next level and increase our senior leadership team to really experienced people. Because we're at that stage now where if we want to get to the next phase of growth, we needed people with a lot of experience in the space, so we don't learn the hard way. So that was a big cost that but we've been able to manage it with the clients we've got. I think as well in this space we're in, it really allows us to work with clients over a longer period of time. So it's nice, whereas typical agencies are kind of just spike, do one project, they're off again. Whereas in our space, we really see ourselves as a creative purpose partner. And that means we actually get more kind of longevity with the client. So it means we can forecast a little bit better, and we can take bigger risks, if you like, with bringing on kind of bigger names or more experienced people, or investing in kind of infrastructure. Like we just built our new HQ and it's 3,500 square foot. We've done it all up for the team. We're kind of building all the operations center, all the tech that goes behind it, all the cybersecurity, all the actual editing booths, everything like that. That's a huge investment, but it's something we need. Like we really see as a creative agency, we need to be together. We need to be face to face. We need to collaborate. We need to learn. Like bringing in super experienced people is great. Like they're going to help us push in the right direction. But the even bigger play off that is the younger teams coming through need to learn, and they need access to learning off those people, right? And that's only going to happen day-to-day, face-to-face, being around that, right? So we haven't got enough time to set up one day of Zoom calls to train them. Like you're better off just living and breathing and actually collaborating face-to-face. So we needed to build the heartbeat of Nuevo to be a really positive, nice, creative space to encourage more people to come back to office, right? Because we offer hybrid working. If it's a dull, typical office with stained carpet tiles and dark walls, no one's going to come into the office, right? They're going to want to work from home, and that's fine. So I kind of stitched myself up a bit where I was like, you've offered hybrid working to get people in the office. Now you're going to have to make it incredible. So then we've had to over-invest in getting people in, which is great now because when they come down, you have everyone together. We're right on the waterfront. So we go for lunchtime walks and get some fresh air and really start building that culture up now, because it is a big ask what we're trying to do. We're trying to look at things completely differently and change the way advertising's done. So it's a huge ask. It's a huge challenge. So we need that time together because it can get pretty stressful at times.
Definitely, man. Definitely when you're working with clients. And that's kind of awesome because like I've seen the office, it actually looks incredible. Like it's all like, like super clean, super modern, like a really good vibe. And if you're getting long-term clients, like 12 months or 18 months, you can kind of project for it. And that's the biggest challenge, of course, for small agencies is like trying to get someone on 3 months is fucking, you need to jump through hoops to do that at some stages, in the very early stages. But of course you build that kind of brand and reputation, looking at, even getting into some of the details on that. So the sustainability space is quite interesting because as you're talking about earlier, that there's greenwashing, there's a lot of other things coming on. So do you think people kind of get into the space for the wrong reasons?
What, in the sustainability space or advertising and sustainability?
Sustainability and even advertising as well. Sustainability and advertising, because like, of course, like it's like a trend. Things are really moving towards that way. But of course, bad actors are in every aspect of business.
Yeah, and I think you're always going to get that. But from what I've seen in the sustainability world, like people are switched on, right? And they can see greenwashing a mile off. And it's kind of one of those things that, unfortunately, it's a good thing and bad thing, right? Because the good thing is it's keeping really strict rules and regulations, and kind of companies are a lot more aware of greenwashing now because they don't want it, because they will get called out for it. So in some ways it's deterred that, which is good. But in other ways, like people are getting greenwashing wrong. They're going out calling people out for greenwashing. It's like, that's not greenwashing. They're just being honest about where they are on their journey and they're trying to make better decisions. So it's like, it comes with kind of negatives and positives, really. There is a lot of people, like the thing for me where we've been burnt a couple of times is partnering with the wrong consultants in the really early days. And they would just kind of be arm distance away. They'd be charging a lot. They won't be giving great advice. And it was just kind of money that you need as a startup, just going out on nothing, really. Like we saw nothing tangible. It was all like, don't do things. Basically, don't do nothing and you'll be better than what you are today. And it's like, well, that's not how you grow a company. You have to work. You have to do stuff. You have to go and shoot stuff. So it took a while to get a really dynamic, good, experienced team with 20 years experience in sustainability, right? So even before it was cool, they were in this space. Yeah. And now we've got people like that really understand the need of, okay, we need to be pragmatic about this. We need to have an approach that goes, we still need to work. We still need to deliver world-class creative, but we need to do it in a way that's as less harmful as possible. And we need to find better ways to do it and actually write templates and processes and frameworks that are going to help the industry move into a better way of doing business. And I think that took a while to find, but now I really feel like we've plugged into the right team that understand that. And sustainability, people say, but they have that kind of thought process behind it that you can't be in sustainability if you're going to make money. That's not true. We're not going to get the mass adoption we need in this space if people think you can only work in sustainability if you're volunteering because it's the right thing to do. Right? I get it. But that's only going to be a handful of people. Like if we can show you can build great businesses built on purpose, that's how we're going to see the mass adoption that we need. So that's something we're really keen to show here, and we're always honest and open about.
And man, I completely agree with you. I think there needs to be that focus that people are going to try making an ROI on whatever they do. They're not just going to spend money to try and improve their processes it's like the opportunity costs. Like we can be green, but have no money and go bankrupt as a business. Or we can, people think it's one or the other, or like pollute the shit out of everything and then make money. Whereas of course there's a happy medium. So when you speak with clients and when you reach out to them, some of the clients you could be working with are quite old style or quite big companies. How do you change the perspective on sustainability with them?
So I guess the biggest thing we learned was that's how the business has evolved. When we started in production, we were like, okay, that's a tangible impact we're having because we lower the headcount, we do all our recce's in virtual reality. When we fly into countries, we actually partner with local kind of communities and locals to bring in supplies, food, water, and get rid of wastage, everything we need. And we really took that from like Nevs, our chief explorer, right? He's a 5 times world record holder for crossing the largest islands on Earth. He was a Marine for 10 years, had severe PTSD, and then went kind of out on this mad mission for 5 years, crossing the largest islands in the world. He didn't have much budget or funding, so he had to really rely on locals to tell him about the hunting seasons, the sea ice getting broken up, the safe passages he could go through, what the weather systems were doing, kind of all that logistics, everything. So he had to rely on that. So when you bring that experience into the production world, you're not scared of relying on local teams, which a lot of production houses are. They're like, no, trust is a big thing. I want to take 90 of my people that I've worked with before in LA, and I want to take them to Greenland. Whereas we're very much like, no, them people on the ground know best. They live there.
Yeah.
The Inuits know the weather systems. They know how to keep people safe. Do you know what I mean? That they know everyone in that space. So we're really much leaning into local communities to help, which massively lowers the carbon footprint of all the travel and everything getting out there, but also has a real positive social impact as well, where you're putting money back into the people and the land you're using and borrowing, right? So that was a massive thing for us, and that is a tangible positive thing straight away we can do now with our skill sets. But then we learn as we kind of evolved, it's reactive. We get given a project or a campaign and we can just do the best we can with that project. If we go upstream and we start in the creative and strategy space, and that's why we launched the teams internally that do that, we can actually help change the brief. And we could actually say, do you even need to go to Greenland? Or could we do this in virtual? Could we do this in virtual production? Or could we go somewhere more local, somewhere with better infrastructure, somewhere like Norway, where we can still get the cold weather on the outskirts, but it's built with electric infrastructure on trams and everything like that we can do. So we went upstream to start changing the brief at the top end. And now we've really learned kind of, that's great. Them service offerings are still kind of running. So we offer creative, strategy and production. But now we're really putting all the minds together with a sustainability team that sits across everything and go, how are we going to change a mass industry? And if you look at our industry, there's incredible kind of siloed pillars and partners doing incredible stuff like Purpose Disruptors, putting great data and research out there. Cambridge University for the courses they're doing and everything. How do we take that information that they're putting out there? How do we bring it in and make it into a content hub? And then almost like run like a partnership with our clients where we update them with panels, podcasts, great content. So then it makes it really accessible and easy to understand and implement into their day-to-day working on their campaigns or briefs. So that's what our big focus is. So we're launching a thing called Nuevo 360, which is kind of created content and this ongoing learning collaboration portal. And the other thing we learned was, have you ever been on set with loads of creatives and there's been a behind the scenes photographer? Sorry, can you hear that Slack channel going mental?
Yeah, you're fine, man. Just flick it off. You can take your time.
There you go, quit it. Yeah, if you've ever been on set with loads of creatives and there's a behind the scenes photographer, that behind the scenes photographer gets bombarded for days. Hey mate, have you got any photos of me? Have you got any photos of me? Creatives love being actually in front of the camera as well. They've all just stories. So I thought, how do we play into that as well, right? Because normally the creatives you get on set, especially big sets, they're confident people. Do you know what I mean? They've had to fight to get to that high level. They want to put out stuff as well and talk about them as a personal brand. So we said, actually, if you flip it and go, with this sustainability piece we're doing, we can actually make the creatives the hero in the story. And if we can do that and give them the information, the behind the scenes, the films, whatever it is, and make them that hero, they're going to speak about it. If they speak about it, they've got big followings, they've got good connections in the network. That's how we're going to get their mass adoption, right? And get the interest. So Nuevo 360 is really designed around giving them the information they need. So it's all about educating and inspiring, but then actually giving them solutions off the back of that. So here's a template using your next campaign. Here's a process that we think you should bring in. Here's something to consider. Here's the platform we use for virtual reality recce's. All that stuff can come together and give them the tools they need on this ongoing kind of collaboration and support piece we're doing. So I think that's how we're going to change the mindsets and influence the advertising industry to move into a much more positive place.
Yeah, man. I think like a big thing there is the fact that most people don't know what to do. So even if they're partnering with you for production, they still don't know what to do in their own day to day because like they're just focused on I don't know, like it might be something completely different. It could be, a specific green company, or it could be like energy or whatever, but they don't really know how to get that across. And even
Yeah.
from working with other people, with my own agency, like most people don't know how to get across their point. So if you're adding in all this new shit about how the impact is on the environment, it's going to be completely different if they're not educated on it. So that's
Yeah.
just net beneficial for everyone. I think it is coming along from a younger age, though. I think a generation beneath us is kind of working upwards. But if you can kind of come in over on top and instill those beliefs on people, it can have a huge impact overall.
So that's, we want to do like a two-pronged attack, if you like, where it's like
Mhm.
at the top end, you've got incredible courses being run out of Cambridge University, for example. But a lot of the people sat on them courses are senior leadership, right? Because they've got the confidence and conviction to say, no, I'm going to do this 8-week, 12-week short course, 5 hours a week learning in work time because it's good for my career path. If you try and get a junior project manager who's just turned up at an agency, turn and say, can't be on that set, I'm doing a short course to learn about sustainability. They're like, no, you're not. We need you to deliver this output. So we want to, and that's 80% of the industry, right? In those roles that are just day to day, going at it. So we want to design something that makes it really easy and accessible for those to have that same learning experience, right? So it's about taking those courses out there that are incredible and say the right things and are backed by data and everything, and then put it into snapshots of like a 5-minute talking head that they can listen to on the train into work. So we're giving them the same information, just in a lot snappier, quicker way to allow them access to it. And then what does that mean? Well, there are 10 points. We've broken down that hour lecture into 10 points about what you can do tomorrow while you're working on that campaign on the kickoff call. So it's how do we make it more accessible for that mass market of people in that creative space?
Mm-hmm. I love it, man. I love it. How do you quantify the impact when you're speaking with clients?
So when we're actually working with our clients, we kind of do a benchmarking process, like an audit, where
Mhm.
because it's hard, there's not many industry standards. You can take the industry standard, but then it won't fit a 3-person marketing department to a 70-person marketing department. So it's really hard to kind of work that piece out. So we do a thing called benchmarking off their previous year. So we'll look at what they did last year and say, right, you shot 7 campaigns. This is all the points of sale you did. This is X, Y, and Z. Then our sustainability teams would then we can't go into direct detail for reporting. We just can't have that data, right? Because we can say, yeah, vegan meals are better on set, for example, than normal meals, but where's that vegan meal traveled from? So there's too many unknowns to go into hard kind of real data that they can report on. So what we do is we use things like the ad green calculator in their data sets, but then we actually traffic light it. So we can say that's red, amber, green. Then we can look across their whole year of content and say, actually, out of the 27 touch points you had in your marketing, 17, 18 of them were red, the rest were amber. And then we can actually benchmark that and say, how do we bring all the reds into amber and how do we bring the ambers into green? Then it's moving it into a more positive place. And you can kind of prove that in a nicer rounded way, rather than, because the last thing we want to do is give them data that isn't 100% accurate and correct. They go out there and make a statement and then they're greenwashing. Right.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of space we're in. And then once we work with them over the next 2-3 years, we'll have all that data much more accurately when we're tracking it for them. Because then we can actually look at every single detail, not hide anything like typical agencies might, right? If they don't want to look bad in what they're doing, then we can actually benchmark properly and get more and more accurate as the years go on working with them.
So the biggest challenge with some of this stuff, usually, as you mentioned too, is the unknown variables.
Yeah.
How much of that plays into the industry of sustainability as a whole? Because, as you said, like the vegan meal on the table didn't kill the cow, but we don't know what truck transported it here, and we don't know how long
Yeah.
it's been in the fucking warehouse before that in some fridge
Yeah.
that's been running on too high. So, like,
Yeah.
at a broader scale in the industry, how do you think about these like unknown variables from like where we're moving towards?
So I think it's just this ongoing process of finding the best way to do business, the best way to track and monitor. And I think if anyone turns around now and says, we've got it completely tied up, we know 100% what we're doing, we're the best at this, there might be 1 or 2 brands out there, but it is hard. It is hard work, right, to get to that level of detail. So I think we just need to accept that everyone's on the journey. Everyone's doing, well, hopefully a lot of people are doing the best they possibly can in that space. And that's where I think actually our world, kind of how you communicate your sustainability, is very important, to be that honest and open and actually flag holes in what you're doing and go, hey, like this is what we're working towards. This is what we're struggling with. Because then it lets consumers know the pinch points you're struggling with as a brand. And it opens up there because there might be people with a solution that can plug in and actually help and collaborate on finding a way. But yeah, there's still a lot of unknowns in the industry. But I think now there's more and more, as it gets more exposure, there's more and more minds coming into the space to find them solutions to fill them gaps.
Yeah, of course. And I think the aspect here is kind of working. It's just always a work in progress, and always having that kind of beginner mindset that you're trying to get better. You're on the process. You're doing as much as you can to a degree, of course, and then you'll be able to track it. It's just sometimes it's very difficult for the masses to be able to conform to that idea because they just want the quick fix, and that's an issue with our own society now. Is the fact that you look at someone like Pepsi and say, oh, they're producing these types of cans or whatever, and as a result now they're like lagging behind. But technically they couldn't change overnight. So I think there needs to be that much more openness, I would guess, in the industry.
Yeah, and then that's why, especially brands, they really do need to communicate open and honestly about what they're doing, because people that are sat there from kind of the sideline, they don't understand, if they haven't been brand side, the actual challenges with changing your whole supply chain or clearing up something, right? So openly tell them what you're working through, tell them the challenges, and then people will be a bit more understanding, because like I really do think consumers will buy into the journey just as much as the end destinations where you're going. So it's about how do you openly, honestly, transparently talk about where you are and the next steps you've got in place. And as long as consumers can see a long-term strategy where the foundations are building correctly, they will one, believe you, and two, trust. And trust is a massive, massive thing now that brands are struggling with connecting with their consumers, right? Because when all this came about, say a couple of years ago, when it really started kind of the talk of the town, that's when brands started going out there with really lofty, ambitious kind of net zero targets and goals and everything. Like we did it. Like we had bad consultants at the start that were like, hey, you can 10x your marketing and stuff like that. We're like, sweet. Like we want to show we're serious and this is where we want to go. So we're like, yeah, let's do it. Let's 10x our thing. And then you actually get real senior sustainability experts come in and go, well, how are you going to benchmark? I mean, we've got the data to work out. And I was like, whoa. But we like have fallen for that as well. Like imagine the brands that have done that as well. And now it's kind of getting to a point where everyone's going, okay, let's realize it's a long-term vision. This is the things we have to take in step-by-step process and really get it right. So yeah, it's an interesting one. Everyone's kind of revert, not going back, because I think their heart's in the right place, their mind's in the right place, they know where they want to go. It was just what we were told 2-3 years ago is completely different to what's actually achievable and what can be done, because more and more data comes out, more and more things we have to consider comes out. So then it's that kind of, just understanding it properly now before we communicate on things.
And man, it's such a big task if you think about how some brands are constructed, how they're built. So if you think about, let's say, clothing brands, fast fashion brands that are coming from India, Asia, China, for them to change has a lot of impact. And the biggest impact they'll have will be on price. So I don't know if you give it much consideration, because I know you're in the production side of things. So maybe the price is still borne on the consumer, but have you had much consideration about how like other brands, so like consumer products, consumer staples, clothing, how that would impact necessarily on price? Because if we have to produce things in a more environmentally friendly way, how would that happen in the end?
So I think short term, it will definitely make the price go up. But again, I think that's how you communicate it, because actually all the stats and data show that consumers now are willing to pay a little bit more for a brand that cares and cleans up the way they act rather than not, right? And that demand's only going to look at the Patagonia effect, right? The demand's only going to get more and more. So I think brands are better off taking that short-term hit and actually bring up their kind of price point of their products, but then sort everything out in the back end, because it's actually building long-term trust with that consumer. So they'll make that money back. And I think it's that serious now that brands that don't make that move and take that hit initially won't be there in the future. And the brands that move there early and quickly have a real big opportunity now to be the flagship, kind of the front runners, the pioneers in this space, and really get it right.
Yeah, of course. And I think, again, as you mentioned, it's going to be a long-term play. One of the last areas I want to get into is mainly around like the skills that you've built and learned. So what do you think the difference is going from your first company to your second company in terms of what you've learned?
I think mindset's a massive one. Rather than kind of having, I still get sleepless nights, but at the start it was like nightly of like, I'm not doing good business because this is, but you're always on that journey, right? You always got more and more people coming on, more kind of staff bills to pay, more salaries to pay, more like everything that comes with it. So I think at the start, I was really like, oh, I can't wait until next month when I'm in a position where I don't have to worry about that. That's not going to go away. So it's you just have to learn as a founder and a CEO to deal with that pressure and understand that that's part of your job, right? So there's no point killing yourself doing it. It's just getting into a sustainable way of life for yourself where you have your anchors and your foundations. Like for me, it's training, right? I know I need to get 3 to 5 sessions in, whether it's just a long run or whether it's a gym or something. Otherwise, if I do a week without it, I feel terrible next week. I'm tired, I'm aggy, I'm all that stuff. So one of them is understanding that this pressure doesn't go away. It's just how you live with it and how you kind of approach it in the most sustainable way so you can stay in your job role for longer, because it is hard startups, right? The second thing is communicating. I've learned you kind of, and I'm still bad at this, right? I'll get a thing in my head and I'll go, oh, that's what we're going to do. I need to do it. And I'll just get on with it. And then the team's like, hey, like, we don't have a clue what you're doing. Like, what's going on? And I'm like, shit, I haven't told anyone. Like, so then it's now I make a massive thing on communicating, get everyone on the same page, and then we all push in one direction. So that's something I have to keep reminding myself. And then I guess the biggest thing is having that inner confidence now. At the start on the roads, it was very much every day I'd question myself on whether I can do it or not. And now it's probably every month. so it's better now. Every month I go, well, I'm not in the right place for this. Like, because I still feel it now. Like, I really feel like I'm not qualified to speak in this space or be doing what I'm doing. But then you look at the kind of 3-year journey we've had and how much we spent on getting it wrong, for example, with offsetting at the start, which we'd moved away from, and all that. It's been a journey, and I've actually learned a lot by being on that journey. And I think people in this space as well, like, I'm open and honest that you could speak to 1,000 more people than me that would be much better qualified to talk about this industry. But I guess people like the fact that we've come at it with no background at all and learned the hard way and really ran with this to try and learn. So it's that one step into the right direction rather than kind of coming into this industry with it all figured out.
Man, that's sick, because you play like the student and the novice all the time. And that's very valuable for other people, because then they can relate to it, number one, and they can also say, well, I can make my company or my agency or my business or just my life a little bit more sustainable. And they're thinking much more with you than against you, because I feel like that sometimes when the fucking expert with a suit who's just after leaving Goldman Sachs tells you to do this, you're just like, oh, fuck off. It's irrelevant to me. So you get much better than that. The confidence speaks point, though, is very interesting, because like I feel like a lot of people struggle with that low-hanging anxiety in the beginning, me definitely included. It's the fact that you really don't think that you can do it every day, or you don't think you have the ability to get up and do it again.
Yeah.
What would you advise younger people who want to kind of follow that path, how to overcome that?
So interestingly, that's the biggest thing I say, the value from Stephen Bartlett and Oliver partnership with Flight Story, is they literally booted me in the back to go get out on stage and talk about this. And I probably wouldn't have done any panel talks, podcasts, anything for another year or two at least. And as soon as they went, get out there, and I did Blue Earth Summit and Planeteers World Gathering, Lisbon and all that stuff, they gave me the confidence, or they just gave me the hard talking to, like, get out there. Otherwise, if you don't, someone else is going to do it, and you've got a good thing going on and you owe it. That is your job. You owe it to all the people putting in the hard work to make this happen. You owe it to them to be the voice. And that was a big push for me on stage. And Ollie said to me, he was like, look, no one really cares. You're just one talk of many on the day. No one cares if you fuck it up, only you. So get over yourself, go and do it and see what happens. And he was like, worst comes worst, you come off, you're still nobody. And I was like, yeah, you're right, you're true. So
I love that,
went out there and just did it. And as soon as I came off, I had this overwhelming feeling of like, that felt good, because I've pushed myself in a situation that I really didn't want to do, that I was scared of. And I come off going, that's really not that bad. So then they really kickstarted this journey. So any kind of founders that are sat there that really believe in what they're doing, even if they haven't got it figured out yet, but it's a mission that they're really working on, speak about it openly. Learn how to tell the story. Learn how to sell yourself and the journey you're on, and talk about it everywhere you possibly can. And it gets easier every time you do it. And just trust yourself and see it as a learning curve, rather than going to the world of a polished thing and going, right, that's it, that's my thing, because it's going to change. Like, I sit on a panel or podcast now, And a month later, my views will change on something, and that's okay. Right? You don't have to have a
Mm-hmm.
polished story that's going to stick with you for 20 years. You just need to be able to evolve and adapt and communicate where you're at that time and day when you step onto that stage or panel. So
Mm-hmm.
that's my biggest thing. Like, just back yourself, get out there and just learn from it. If you mess it up, it's a learning thing. Like on Planetary as well, we stood on stage and we go to play the brand film and it just stops. And that leads me into my stuff. So I had someone on stage saying, make something up. And then I had someone over there saying, hold on, we'll get it going in 5 seconds. And it lasted 2 minutes. 2 minutes just stood there to a mass audience. And I was just like, this is going horribly wrong. But I thought way straight in my head, I went, well, at least on the next one, when it doesn't do this, it's a win. So you're just learning from everything you're doing. And it's when you start putting yourself out there, the amount of support you get and the amount of people that are either thinking the same or want to see you succeed is huge. And then you start getting the intros and the opportunities like this, and it starts really spiraling.
Of course, man. It's literally the network effect. And the beautiful part of that is that you don't say that you have a one defined story. It's evolutionary. And if I look at the stuff that I was producing 3 years ago, I was a different person, you know? And in 2 years' time, I'll be a different person. I'll probably be doing something different. Still be recording podcasts, but I'll be doing, that's like the purpose of it. You're not like one single individual. And that's the great part of it, you know? And that's why if you don't speak with absolute certainties, like this is the way it should be, or even if you do have your opinion, you know that it's fluid. It can definitely change, but you're trying to improve like the industry and improve the entire sector, to be honest. So that's super valuable, man, because people, especially UK and Irish people, wait too long and they put off all this side of things, even though they have great businesses and even though they have great ideas. So that building in public is hugely valuable.
Yeah, I think so. It builds that trust again, and people feel like they know you. So now we kind of jump on calls with new businesses, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we've been following the journey of Nuevo for the last 6-7 months." So you start telling a story, and they're like, "Yeah, I saw that. I know that." So you've already got that level of trust because they've seen you've been doing it openly and honestly. So I think it massively helps. We're only starting to really see that now, 6 months into publicly talking about everything we're doing.
That's amazing, man. Well, man, I want to say a massive thank you. I really appreciate your time. You're on to a great path, man. And
Thank you.
I'd love to record more sessions in the future. Do one in person. Get a good studio when I go to the UK next time.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you for your time, mate. Nice to chat to you.